Good day to everyone again, and welcome back to Moving Virtual Assistants, where we are transaction coordinators and we are here to assist realtors in managing multiple clients and grow a successful real estate business one transaction at a time. So today we're going to be discussing the Additional Provisions Addendum. Okay, in this addendum, we're going to need the property address. And that's the property that, of course, the buyer is wanting to purchase from the seller. This contract is between the seller and the buyer. So their names will be here. And this addendum is attached to and made a part of the offer to purchase and contract between the seller and the buyer for this particular property. All of the following provisions, which are marked with an X, shall apply to the attached offer to purchase and contract or the offer to purchase and contract vacant lot land contract. Those provisions marked NA shall not apply. So let's start off with number 1, the expiration of the offer. This offer shall expire unless unconditionally acceptance is delivered to the buyer on or before blank day. So we need to put a date in there. So when we are submitting the offer as on the buyer side, we want to know maybe by tomorrow or the next day, just depending on the season, if it's a buyer's market, if it's a seller's market, because sometimes if it's a seller's market, they'll hold these offers until they get other offers in and kind of make a decision. But we're going to still put in place, this is what we would want to know, best practices by tomorrow at 5 p.m. On that day, time being of the essence, or until withdrawn by the buyer, whichever occurs first. Number 2, this is to be used with offer to purchase and contract form 2T only if there's a septic system installation modification. Now, so if this property doesn't have a septic system, or if it does have a septic system, but they're not going to get an inspection or whatever, this can be left blank. However, if it is, as a part of the buyer's due diligence, the buyer intends to obtain an improvement permit or written evaluation from the county health department for a check only, and then you need to check only one. If this is a conventional septic tank or whatever, if it's another different kind, then we need to specify what kind it is in this slot here. Ground absorption sewer system for a blank bedroom home. So we need to put in here how many bedrooms is in this home. Because what we're trying to do is find out if this septic tank is conducive to the amount of bedrooms there, or if they're thinking about getting an addition on, they could want to be finding out, the buyer could want to find out if this system can support that or not, because they might be wanting to look ahead and say that, hey, we might have to get a whole nother septic system installed in here because we are planning to add on. So the buyers need to do their due diligence definitely and get an inspection if any of those are a concern. Except for the costs for clearing the property, all costs and expenses of obtaining such permit or written evaluation shall be borne by the buyer unless otherwise agreed. The seller shall be responsible for clearing the portion of the property required by the county to perform its tests and or inspections by no later than, and then we're going to put a date in here. So if the buyer is deciding to get this done and they have made the necessary contacts to get the inspection schedule, then they need to get in contact with the seller, and the seller needs to have that area clear for the inspectors to do their inspection. So here this note says, insert a date that will allow the testing to be completed prior to the end of the due diligence. So we need to get this done before that due diligence period expires. Number 3, rental income investment properties. The property shall be conveyed subject to existing lease and or rights of tenants. Seller shall deliver to buyer on or before, and then we're going to insert the date here, true and complete copies of all existing leases, rental agreements, outstanding tenant notices, written statements or oral tenant agreements, statements of all tenant deposits, uncured defaults, by seller or tenants and claims made by or to the tenants, if any. Seller authorizes and directs any property management company and any attorney who currently represents or who have previously represented the seller to release to buyer, buyer's agent, representative, closing attorney, or lender true and accurate copies of the above items, as well as the rent roll, to include property address, amount of the current monthly rent, amount of security deposits, and all past due rent amounts. So this is a property that the buyer is purchasing that is a rental income. It has tenants in there. This is the stuff, the items that the sellers needs to address and have and be able to agree to release to the new buyer. This note says insert a date that will allow review to be completed prior to the end of the due diligence period. So again, remember that the due diligence fee is the amount that the buyer is paying to the seller for the buyer to be able to do all of their investigations and inspections on the property. But all of these items need to be done prior to the expiration of the due diligence period. Any security deposit held in connection with any lease or leases shall be transferred to the buyer at settlement, and otherwise, in accordance with the North Carolina Tenant Security Deposit Act, the seller will or will not transfer to the buyer any pet fee deposit at settlement. So we need to check off there if there's a pet fee. Usually, just like with the due diligence fee or the pet fees, those fees are non-refundable. So we need to address here. The seller needs to address if they're withholding those fees or not. Seller shall deliver assignment or any lease at or before closing, unless the lease does not permit assignment. Okay, the name, address, telephone number, and email address of any property manager or property management company for the property is, and we need to, they'll need to put all of that in this, all of those contacts in this section. All means of access to the property other than those in tenant's possession, including all keys, codes, including security codes, garage door openers, and electronic devices, must be delivered to buyer at closing. Now let's see what this note says. It says, do not use this provision for property subject to the North Carolina Vacation Rental Act. A Vacation Rental Act addendum should be used in such cases. So it's just saying that we can't use this addendum for vacation rentals. There is a specific addendum that we would use if if the buyer is purchasing a vacation rental. We need initials here at the bottom of the page for this from the sellers and the buyers. Okay, we're on number 4, and this is the agreed upon repairs and or improvements. So this is the section where we're going to, if there's any type of negotiation of repairs or improvements that we see as the buyer up front when we went and viewed the property, that is pretty much obvious that we wanting to get this done. I mean, you don't have to be an inspector to see a hole in the wall or a hole in the roof, whatever, the case may be. If there's something that we've seen with our own eyes, we're going to go ahead and request that up front before we even get our home inspection. This is the section where you will put those particular items. The buyer shall have the right to verify prior to settlement that the above items have been completed in a good and workmanlike manner. Number 5, manufactured mobile homes. The property shall include the following manufactured mobile homes located on the property. And so they want, we need to put the VIN number, any type of serial, year, make, and model of that particular manufactured home. We need to address that in this section. Number 6, pool spa inspections preparations. Any pool spa inspections buyer may choose to conduct shall be at the buyer's expense in accordance with the contract. Any costs associated with putting the pool spa in operable condition so that it may be properly inspected, including but not limited to the pool spa cover removal, filling the pool spa with water, operating electricity and filtration system, and any costs associated with any necessary re-winterizing of the pool spa following any inspection shall be the responsibility of the seller or the buyer. If neither box is checked, the buyer shall assume responsibility for that. So this is something that needs to be negotiated on. If there is a pool or spa there, it's not just automatically the sellers on the sellers to take care of these items. The sellers and the buyer need to figure out, negotiate on who's going to be responsible for that. And again, if none of these boxes are checked off, then the buyer understands that this is their responsibility to take care of those items at their expense. And number 7, off-site and or separate septic lots, boat slips, garages, parking spaces, storage units. Sale of the property shall include the following, and we need to check all that applies: the deed, lease, sell owned, HOA owned, septic lot, boat slip, garage, parking spaces, or storage units. Describe any and all above. So anything that's a boat slip or a septic tank or any separate garage, parking space, or whatever, we need to address these items, those items in this section. Now, this says that the seller agrees to execute any additional documents if necessary at the seller's expense to complete the transfer of the seller's interest in any property described in this paragraph. So again, all of those items needs to be identified in this particular paragraph, and all the documents that's necessary to transfer that over to the buyer, that is the seller's at the seller's expense. Okay, in the event of a conflict between this addendum and the contract, this addendum shall control, except that in the case of such a conflict as to the description of the property or the identity of the buyer or the seller, the contract shall control. So again, this was in this particular paragraph is in a lot of the contracts, a lot of the agreements, the addendums. So if there is any issue or conflict with the description of the property, if something was off and something that we thought that this was the property and this wasn't the property, or the serial number doesn't match what we have, the VIN number or something like that, or the identity of the buyer or client, they really did not own this property. Once we did our due diligence and found out from looking up some information that the seller does not own this property, the contract, the offer to purchase and contract will supersede this particular addendum. But in the event all is well, if there's a conflict between this addendum and the contract, then this addendum will supersede the contract. The North Carolina Association of Realtors Incorporated and the North Carolina Bar Association makes no representation as to the legal validity or adequacy of any provisions of this form in any specific transaction. If you do not understand this form or feel that it does not provide for your legal needs, you should consult a North Carolina real estate attorney before you sign it. So again, that's pretty self-explanatory. The North Carolina Association of Realtors does not create these forms and these agreements and anything, in these transactions that the contracts and all of that, they do not create these forms. So if we have any issues with anything as a buyer or as a seller, if you have any issues with anything that's being stated in any of these addendums, you need to consult a North Carolina real estate attorney before you sign it. And then we'll need buyer's initials and seller's initials at the end of this page, the bottom of this page. And then going into the next page, we'll need signatures here for the buyer and the seller, the dates as well. If this is an entity on the buyer side or entity on the seller side, corporation, LLC, we'll need the name of that corporation and then the point of contact, the executor of the estate, whoever it is. This is where they would need to go ahead and put their name and signature, put their name in this section and their title as well.